doesn't mean that you should study less for it, because it is hard. As you go, it is gonna get harder. So I personally recommend you to study really hard for it because it is not an easy concept.
On today's Lion Academics.
Hi, I'm Amelia and I'm from Lion Academy, and today we're going to be doing a deep dive into AP Chemistry. So why is chemistry important? Chemistry is important in all aspects of life. Whenever you're using water, that's also chemistry. If you're actually interested in chemistry, yes, it is very important to take AP Chemistry. If you are any STEM student, it is kind of like mandatory, such as like same as AP Bio, to take AP Chemistry if you are kind of like going into the pre-med or medical field as well. Also, taking AP Chemistry helps you kind of build a foundation towards actual like chemistry that you're going to be doing in college. And from my experience, it did actually help me do better in college. I asked a lot of my peers as well, and a lot of my friends, they also kind of use their knowledge from AP Chemistry, and during class they're like, oh, I remember this from AP Chemistry. So it plays such a big role compared to even AP Biology. I think chemistry helps you out more in college if you're taking chemistry, because from my university, I go to BU, and where our chemistry classes are really hard and they're really advanced compared to other schools when I compared with my friends from other schools. So doing AP Chemistry actually helps you a lot, and depending on what school you go to, AP Chemistry is always like helpful towards chemistry. So today we're going to be talking about Unit 1, which is atomic structure and properties. This is basically the beginning stage of chemistry. You talk about molar mass and moles, and you talk about the electronegativity of certain atoms, and you get to kind of understand the periodic table, which is really useful towards all the chemistry units and just chemistry in general. So I say this is like the most important chapter for AP Chemistry, because this is where you understand everything, and everything that you understand here is applied further on. If you do not understand anything here, such as converting moles to molecules to atoms, like those kind of processes, you will literally fail every single other unit because that is being applied every single time. If you struggle with that, you have to completely be confident in this chapter. This section surprisingly consists 7 to 9% of the exam, but it is one of the most important parts of the exam. You just have to know this. You have to be confident in doing this because it sets the foundation for every single other unit that you're going to go through. One more other thing, you learn about valence electrons and everything here as well, such as I told you that you learn about the periodic table. You have to kind of know everything that you learn here, even valence electrons and everything, because these vocabs and these like concepts are all going to come out in Unit 2, 3, 4, and everything until the end. And if you are confused like, oh, what are valence electrons, because they come out in the exam, you will not do well because you do not understand the main concepts, and these are the basics of chemistry. So I just want to really emphasize that. Unit 2 consists of molecular and ionic compounds and structure and properties. This is where you start to learn about the types of chemical bonds that are involved in each of these atoms or molecules, and you get to learn the intermolecular forces. One thing about intermolecular forces, these are really important. They become more advanced towards later chapters on AP Chemistry, and you learn about Lewis structures here. And this is the beginning stage where you learn about Lewis structures. It becomes way advanced. There are multiple steps towards Lewis structures of how to draw them. First, like you learn about the basics of like how to count the valence electrons, and then start drawing the Lewis structure based on that. But later on, you go into like double bonds, you go into more complex stages of drawing Lewis structures. And I learned this in college as well. Knowing how to draw Lewis structures in AP Chemistry really helps you understand in college, because everything goes really quick in college. So if you already know how to do all these complex stuff before, then you're kind of already ahead, or you're on set. And this also is consisted of 7 to 8% of the exam, which is kind of like also on the small side, but I'd say that the first 3 chapters of AP Chemistry is really important. Unit 3 is intermolecular forces and properties. This is where you learn how atoms come together and all the complex molecular structures forms, such as liquids, solids, and things like that. And you learn about solutions and how certain substances mix and things like that. It's kind of like a bit more complex than the other 2 chapters, but it is on the same level. And this Unit 3 actually is 18 to 20% of the test, which is actually really big compared to the other ones. But as I said before, in order to do these kind of things, you have to have a strong foundation of like Unit 1 and Unit 2. I suggest you really have to focus on completing Unit 1 and Unit 2 with your full understanding. Unit 4 is about chemical reactions. So you start to learn about stoichiometry, which is a bit more harder than the other concepts that you've previously learned in chemistry. And you learn about net ionic equations. You are introduced to different reactions, and you also learn about physical and chemical changes of certain liquids or certain materials. This is about 7 to 8% of the exam. So it is not big, but it is a bit one of the harder, more like detailed parts of chemistry. Here's where it gets a little bit more complicated. So Unit 5 talks about kinetics. So you get to observe the certain changes that are occurring during a certain reaction, and you get to learn about the reaction rate, which a lot of people do not like, and you're introduced into the rate laws. Now you're starting to get into the math part of chemistry, where first unit was like converting, which is like simple, easy math, but now it's more like complicated. And also one thing about chemistry is that you have to read the question really carefully, because the question itself is mainly hard to even understand sometimes. And so there are times where like you're going to be reading the question over and over again, like struggling to understand. So that is one thing about chemistry. The questions are a bit more hard to understand. The questions might mean for you to solve a different thing, but you might recognize it to solve like this other thing. So it's very confusing sometimes. And you also talk about the collision model, and you are introduced to reactional mechanisms as well. So this part is consisted 7 to 8% of the exam. So it is also a really small part, I guess, but as you go, chemistry is harder. Even if the percentage of each unit is a bit low, such as 7 to 8%, doesn't mean that you should study less for it, because it is hard. As you go, it is gonna get harder. So I personally recommend you to study really hard for it, because it is not an easy concept. Unit 6 is about thermodynamics. Now here you're introduced to different sets of laws in chemical reactions, such as Hess's law, and you get to learn about enthalpy formation and heat transfer and thermal equilibrium. And you also get to learn about exothermic and endothermic, meaning it's mainly consisted of heat. So you get to learn about when heat is like leaving the chemical reaction, or like heat is introduced or something like that. And thermodynamics is mostly consisted of how an energy can transfer within certain reactions to each other and can change a substance's physical qualities. So this is also 7 to 9% of the exam, which is pretty low. And this is not as hard as the other ones that I have been mentioning, but it is still a bit complex. Make sure to not be confused between exo and endothermic, because a lot of times like that can be confusing during exams. You see a word saying like this is an exothermic reaction. You're like, what was exothermic and what was endothermic? Because you get to be confused about the other two. Unit 7 is equilibrium. So here you kind of learn about what causes substances to reach its equilibrium and how systems react when it is at their equilibrium point. And you learn about how to calculate equilibrium constants. You're introduced to solubility and equilibrium principles, and you get to learn about pH as well, along with solubility. This is also 7 to 9% of the exam, but it is a bit more complex, as there are some calculations when it comes to like calculating equilibriums, and a lot of the things that you've learned previously are going to come out from this chapter. Everything you've done in the previous chapter are going to be included every single time in the new unit, so make sure to just keep that in mind. Unit 8 is about acids and bases. So you'll learn about pH qualities, acidity, and how they interact in chemical reactions. And so you get introduced into acid reactions and certain buffers, and this is the part where you'll be doing a lot of lab in class. For AP Chemistry, you do a lot of labs based on acids and bases, where you can see the difference in changes of pH and things like that. And this also plays a really important role in the test as well, as a lot of the questions are all like related to acids and bases. Many of them are, and this is 11 to 15% of the exam, which is a bit higher than the other ones that I previously mentioned. And one tip is that you should really focus in actually understanding the lab when you're doing it in class, because the actual labs that you will be doing in the classes in your school are sometimes mentioned as examples in the test. Sometimes you're gonna be like, oh, we did this lab in class, and so you'll be able to solve the questions more easily than before. So please pay attention during lab and make sure you actually fully understand the lab. Unit 9 is the application of thermodynamics. So this is kind of different than the previous unit where it was only thermodynamics. This is where you'll be introduced into the concept of thermodynamic favorability, and it basically means how energy changes in different environments. And you get to be introduced into entropy, which this will be later used in your college classes for chemistry, such as like Chem 101. It gives like a slight introduction in this chapter, and you get to learn about free energy and equilibrium. So now as it goes, you get to go into the really complex parts of AP Chemistry, or in chemistry in general. As the units go towards like the end, the more it's going to be coming out on your college like classes. So make sure to just like fully know everything in AP Chemistry if you really want to be prepared in college classes, because a lot of my friends really struggled in chemistry, and it's not because they're dumb. It's really actually hard, and it's one of the hardest like STEM courses that you can take. So make sure to be fully prepared, and taking AP Chem is the best way to actually be prepared for college classes for chemistry. So one thing about chemistry is that it is kind of different than AP Biology or other subjects, is because it's not mainly memorization. Yes, you do have to memorize some vocabs that are introduced in the chemistry concepts, but it's mainly about understanding and being able to solve the problems. It does require some math. So if you are struggling in math, you might struggle a bit in chemistry because it does involve a lot of math and like conversions, and also you have to use your calculator. So math is really involved in chemistry as well. Also, you have to practice solving a lot of the questions because the questions are kind of hard to understand. And so it is not like bio where you can memorize a certain amount of things and be like, okay, I memorized this, so like I could do this. It's not like that because not all the chemistry questions are like the same. All calculation wise, it's like different. So you have to understand how to calculate this. You gotta like understand how you can approach different questions and still be fine with it, even if the wording changed a bit, because it still may be the same concept. So the best way to approach this is by solving a lot of questions, just constantly practicing. This is what I've been doing in university as well. Like I've been constantly solving chemistry problems in order to pass a test because that's the best way to study for it. So watching videos about it and things like that can help. Also, Khan Academy can really help as well. But after watching videos, you have to know how to solve it. Taking notes is also important, but solving the actual questions constantly is more important than anything else. So one other thing is that if you go to an academy for AP Chemistry, you do get some help. You do get to ask questions that you aren't sure, and you do get some help in terms of like how to approach certain questions as well. However, it's really important to just know how to solve everything by yourself, because at the end of the day, when you're in the test center, you are by yourself and you will find the best way of how you can solve these questions by trying it out yourself. And so that really helps. For example, for me, I was also like sometimes in a panic situations where I didn't understand chemistry, but I tried myself and I like searched things up in the internet. I tried getting questions out and I tried like just solving a lot and just going back to like maybe my class teacher and asking her questions about it. And that's like the main part. Academies do help, but at the end of the day, it will be you who are solving the problem. So you have to focus in solving all those problems. You have to prioritize solving the problems rather than just going to academies and thinking that you're going to be okay. So if you're a student who is taking AP Chemistry soon, I wish you really good luck. And I just want to say that this will really help you out in terms of college as well. So just don't be mad that you have to take this exam. You will do well. Try to enjoy it. Try to learn it because it is very important for the rest of your careers in college as well. So good luck to everyone. Bye!